Do you think that you're ready for a check ride? Yesterday I did an evaluation with a guy who was wanting to come up from another state to come up and do a CFI. And it occurred to me when I was doing this Zoom yesterday, we have a common theme with people, and that common theme is, oh, hey, I want to come up and finish my check ride. Yeah, my ground's good, I'm ready. And of course I have Heather trained in now that they always say they're ready on the phone or the text message or the email. And then once we jump on a Zoom, it usually takes about 5 or 10 minutes, maybe 15, before I'm going, okay, you're not ready. So yesterday I was doing one. Gentleman didn't do too bad. He did decent, but it's just for initial CFI. And pretty quickly I'm like, okay, I don't want to make you feel bad here, but you're pretty common to what we find. You got some more studying to do, okay? And he was cool about it. And he's got some time. He's not looking until coming until October anyway. I said, you got plenty of time to hit the FOIs and hit all your general knowledge stuff. And the FOIs for CFI specifically, you got to suck it up and do the studying. That's it. That's all you can do. We're not going to go into that right now because this is more of a general video for anybody. I'm going to say private, commercial, or CFI, because the examiner is still going to ask you all the basic stuff. Our examiner I've been using for 23 years is super fair, but he wants you to know the knowledge. And the problem that people have is that the knowledge isn't as good as they think it is at the private level. And then they'll want to come and do a commercial, and I'll start asking them stuff, and I'll go, I'm asking you basic private pilot stuff. I'm like, yeah, but this is a commercial. I'm like, I know, but commercial is knowing everything you knew at the private level and knowing it even better and asking really smoothly and not spending a lot of time. At the private level, examiners expect some trouble with terminology and expect you to stumble a little bit, but they expect that same knowledge at the commercial level to be smoother, solid, more in depth. And then the CFI level, you're gonna have to teach all that information, so you need to be really smooth. So these things are relevant no matter which one you're going for, private, commercial, CFI. I start the same way, because even on the CFI, for example, he does about 2 hours of FOIs, and then he goes in and starts asking you the general stuff that I'm going to ask you now. So my reference is my notebook. We used to sell this. We don't sell it anymore. But this is what I do, hands down. This is the very simple process when I jump on someone with Zoom, and they're thinking about traveling up here, or if they're bound and determined, they're coming and they swear their ground's good. We sit down here on the couches, and this is what I use, and I start asking questions. So let's give you a little example. I'm gonna do the first couple pages and give you some ideas of things an examiner's gonna ask you. Just ideas, right? Any examiner can ask different things however they want, no matter where you are in the world or where you are in the country. But this is how I do it. So let's get started. One of the first things I ask them is, what happens if you get intercepted by military aircraft when you're out flying around? Right away, you should think TFR. What do? Tune into 121.5 and comply with whatever they tell you to do, right? You'd be surprised at the amazing answers on private or even commercial level. Oh, yeah, what's that frequency? Or somebody will make a wisecrack, and it's like, no, you can't make a wisecrack. If you're getting intercepted by military aircraft, you have busted a TFR. That number needs to be right on the end of your tongue, 121.5. You need to be ready to comply with whatever they tell you to do. A couple of those simple questions that always get asked. What is pressure altitude? You'd be amazed. I ask that question and somebody goes, oh yeah. And they start giving you some, big weather statement about pressure. And it's like, look, it's not that hard. It's what you get when you dial 29.92 in your Colesman window and you read pressure altitude directly from your altimeter, okay? Very easy. Density altitude, pressure altitude corrected for non-standard temperature. Private level, commercial level, CFI, that should just roll right off your tongue. Those are pretty easy, but you'd be surprised the amount of people that, it's my first interview with them and they struggle in those first 3 questions, and I'm going, okay, how ready are you if you're not answering these basic simple questions? So then let's move on to retreating blade stall. I usually hit that pretty early in a interview with somebody because I know this is one they're gonna hit. What is retreating blade stall? Give the examiner a very simple definition, and I like, it's when the retreating blade exceeds the critical angle of attack. Done. That's a very short, smooth answer. If they ask you what it is, give them a short answer. Guys or girls will start going, well, you've got an advancing blade and you've got a retreating blade and da-da-da, and they start going into all this. Examiner didn't ask you that. Examiner said, what is retreating blade stall? Give them a very short, smooth answer. So as you're preparing for your check ride, you should have short, small sentences to answer a lot of these things, and then let the examiner dig further. You know, we say all the time, it's like you're going to court. Don't give the examiner any more than he's asking for. Answer short, sweet, and possible, or as sweet as possible. So what is retreating blade stall? It's when the retreating blade exceeds the critical angle of attack. Great. So with all these things that we talk about, and we'll continue on with retreating blade stall, you need to know what it is, what are you going to notice on the aircraft, and what are you going to do to get yourself out of it? So keep those in mind on all these different aerodynamic things that happen. So it would be very common for them to ask, what are the 3 things you're going to notice at the onset of retreating blade stall? It's abnormal vibration, pitch up of the nose, and then a roll to the retreating side. A lot of times somebody will go, a vibration and then roll to the left. Well, roll to the retreating side. It's not to the left or right, it's to the retreating side. You might be flying clockwise, you might be flying counterclockwise. So abnormal vibration, pitch up of the nose, roll to the retreating side. Why does the nose pitch up? Due to gyroscopic precession. You're starting to lose lift over here, and then you feel it 90 degrees later due to gyroscopic precession. That's why the nose goes up. And then as it continues to stall on the retreating side, it is then going to go roll towards that retreating side. And I see a lot of people really struggle with that. Okay, so retreating blade stall, we know that if we go above V&E, we can get into retreating blade stall. Okay, that's a given. Second part of that question on a V&E is structural limitations of the aircraft. I'll always ask that. It's retreating blade stall and it's structural limitations of the aircraft is why we have a V&E. But then I'll say, okay, so what are some of the other factors other than V&E? What are some other factors that contribute to that? And they'll go, well, going too fast. I'm like, well, we just said that. You exceeding V&E. So that's a given, right? You exceed V&E, you get a retreating blade stall. There's 5 things that can contribute to that. And many times somebody will give me that deer in the headlight look. Low RPM, okay? Yes, that's one of them. And then I always say the same thing. Anytime an examiner asks you about something that's bad, something bad that goes on in the helicopter, something with poor performance, you always immediately think of high gross weight, high density altitude. Boom. Those are always 2 you can think of. So get those 2 out of the way. On retreating blade stall, we have 5. So boom. If you think, oh man, there's 5 things. Well, high gross weight, high density altitude. Boom, those 2 are done. Low RPM, the student said that. Great. Well, the other 2, steep or abrupt turns and turbulent air. Those are 5 things that can contribute to that retreating blade stall. What do? Everybody just says slow down. That's true. Go a little more than that. Reduce collective, increase RPM if needed, reduce forward airspeed, and minimize maneuvering. Just in that one page, from the top of that page to there, I'm formulating whether I think you're even close to being ready. If you're nailing all that stuff, I'm going, okay, let's move on, let's dig further, but I'm liking what I hear. So I still say with Sailing with Power, it's vortex ring state now by the book. But of course, everybody that's flying a helicopter needs to know the 3 things you combine together that can get you into Sailing with Power. It's rate of descent 300 feet per minute or greater, using 20 to 100% of power, airspeed less than ETL. When's ETL happen? 16 to 24 knots. The Sailing with Power, I don't care what you're rating you're going for, this needs to be smooth. And most people are kind of so-so with this, but they usually kind of struggle around with it and they get part of it, but they don't get it all right. The reason I'm going to harp on this one is when I failed my first private pilot check ride, which is why I built this book, by the way, I was struggling around with Sailing with Power with those 3 things. And after I failed, he said, you know, on the oral, one of the things you struggled with was Sailing with Power. And he said, you started giving me bits and pieces, but it wasn't smooth. And he was like, You know, I'm an FAA inspector and I don't want to come to your accident. You need to know those three things for setting the power, and you need to be able to go like this, and like this. That was at the private level. So I've always made sure for all my private commercial CFI applicants, they know selling with power. I'll ask them this 20 times, possibly between the time they start and the time they take their check ride. I'll ask this over and over because you want this smooth. Rate of descent 300 feet per minute or greater, using 20 to 100% of power, airspeed less than ETL. When does that take place? 16 to 24 knots. So that's for everybody, private, commercial, CFI. Then our examiner has three situations that he wants to hear about at the commercial level. He'll ask us at private. He won't fail you if you don't get them, but he will fail you at the commercial level, because these are more situations that once you're flying in the commercial environment, that it's very common that you could get into something with power. And one of them is a steep approach, or steep approach airspeed near zero. People almost every time say, steep approach downwind. And I go, yes, but it's not necessarily steep approach downwind. It can be just steep approach. It doesn't have to have tailwind, right? Like downwind is bad, we know that. You should be avoiding that at all cost. So steep approach, excuse me, attempting to hover above the hovering ceiling. And people have a hard time coming up with this one, but this happens in the real world. I'm driving up to Michigan to do some testing for the FAA on some avionics equipment and a turbine helicopter. I'm driving up to go do this testing, and I was gonna have to hover at 30 minutes at 13,500 feet. And I'm talking to my buddy on the phone as I'm driving up there, and he goes, hey, don't forget to check the POH and make sure you can hover at 13.5. And I went, oh yeah, good idea. So I get there, I check, yes, I can hover. FAA arrives, and we're getting ready to go do the flying because the FAA guy was going with me. And he's like, so can we hover today up there at 13.5? I'm like, sure can. He goes, how do you know? I go, because I checked the POH before you got here. He's like, good answer. Brian Rutledge, our operations manager, had a story about out in California. They were taking a bunch of SWAT guys up into the mountains, and the guy had been flying forever, didn't think to check the POH. And they got up in the mountains and tried to hover in a UE and started selling with power because they couldn't hover, because it was an attempt to hover above the hovering ceiling. And then the other one is, I call it attempting to hover out of ground effect without precise attitude control, which to me means photo flights, right? Like a photo flight, you could be up there by nature. If you go to do a photo flight at the commercial level, you're gonna be circling somebody's house to take pictures, or a business. And you'll be downwind, and the photographer will always say, stop right there. That's the perfect picture. And you have to say, I can't stop right here because I have a tailwind behind me. Oh, but stop, I need that shot, right? It never fails. The photo that a photographer wants is always putting you almost always in a bad position. It's never right one. The perfect shot's never when the wind is right off your nose. And that's why those three things are super important, because those are common ways a commercial pilot could get into something with power. So good to know at the private level. Your required equipment. Some people do pretty good with this. A lot of them I have to go, yeah, you're gonna have to sit back and study that a little bit, because you have to know the required equipment, okay? There's different memory aids out there. I use CamoFoot or Camel's Foot. I've been using for years. Compass, airspeed, manifold pressure, altimeter, fuel gauge, oil pressure, oil temperature, tachometer. The Camel's Foot, I think, is lights, and Camel's Foot, L is for lights and S for seatbelts, I believe. They're gonna ask you about required equipment. That's any aircraft. Then they're gonna say, for example, we fly the R-44, they're gonna say, okay, that's for any aircraft day VFR. What do you have to have for the R-44? And for us in the Raven 1, it's governor, outside air temperature, altimeter, low RPM system horn and light, and hydraulics have to be operating. And I know that because we just recently looked that up, because there's some different memory aids, whether you're flying R-22 or flying R-44, on what you have to have in there. That is directly in the POH. So whatever aircraft you're flying, in the Robinsons, there's some specific things in the POH that are added to day VFR equipment for any aircraft. So right there's just 2 pages. If you're struggling in any of those areas, I would say you're not quite ready yet. But if you're going through and you're just acing that and you're going, yeah, okay, you might be ready to get on a plane and come up here and do your final approach course with us. Flight reviews, minimum 1 hour flight, 1 hour ground. Surprised how many people don't know that a lot of the time. Can it be more if the instructor wants it to be more, sure. If you're not proficient, the instructor may require that to be a little bit more than that. And examiners know what goes on in the real world, and I've heard of this going on. Hey, Joe, I need a flight review. Can you sign me off? I know you need one too. I'll sign you off too. And they switch signatures, sign each other off, and they really didn't even go fly or do any ground because they're buddies. So make sure that you're not doing something along that line. So make sure you're getting a legitimate flight review, a minimum of 1 hour flight and 1 hour of ground. Annual inspections or inspections. What kind of inspections do we need at minimum? We need an annual inspection. 100 hours for compensation or higher. 24 months altimeter transponder. Comply with ADs and SBs, airworthiness directives and service bulletins. You're gonna have to know what those are. If you're struggling with those, you're not ready. That's basic stuff. Here's another one I like. I love the ask, and examiners love it if you know this. It's the 5 C's if you get lost. A lot of guys know it, and when they pop these off, I'm impressed. If they don't, I say, you know what? You should know this, because if the examiner asks, and our examiner does ask this, it's very easy to remember if you think about it. Climb, communicate, confess, comply, conserve. Climb. In a helicopter, you could just climb 500 feet and go, oh, there's that lake I was looking for. There's that water tower. There's that highway. Very easy to get yourself unlost if you just climb. But if you climb and that doesn't work, communicate. Call a local airport. Call a local approach. Confess that you're lost, that you don't know where you're at. Comply with what they tell you to do, and then set your proper speed to conserve your fuel. So climb, communicate, confess, comply, conserve. Makes sense if you think through it. Very simple, but it's a great way if you do get lost, your GPS quits, or whatever bad happens in the helicopter that all of a sudden you find yourself, you're not sure where you're at. 5 C's. I've done that in bad weather, called a local airport because I knew I was close, but the weather was getting kind of low, visibility wasn't so great. I call up the FBO and they go, what do you see? I told them, they go, oh, well, here's where you're at. Follow that road until you see a stoplight, turn left, and about a half mile to the south, you'll find the airport, right? I called locally, told them I couldn't find the airport, and they gave me directions, and I did it. Works great. Squawk codes, very simple. It's 1200 for VFR, 7500 for hijack, 7600 radio failure, and 7700 emergency. Examiners are going to ask you that. 99.9% sure they're going to ask you that. What's key to good approach? Good setup. What's key to good auto? Good setup. What's key to a normal approach? Good setup. No matter what it is you're doing, if you set it up, it'll be nice. If you set it up sloppy, it's going to be sloppy. Aha, here's another good one. I ask people if they have a good memory aid for if they have an engine or tail rotor failure, which way's the nose going to go? And people that watch our videos usually know this. I was taught this when I was a new CFI. We're doing a hover taxi down a taxiway. I'm getting checked out by a senior instructor to do something in a specific aircraft make and model. And we're hover taxiing along and he goes, okay, right now if the engine quits, which way's the nose going to go? And of course I paused for a second thinking engine, torque, and he goes, too late, too long. You have to know immediately when something happens, was it the engine, was it the tail rotor? And at that time he said, remember the movie E.T.? And I'm like, sure. And he's like, remember E.T.? If the nose goes to the left, it's the engine. If the nose goes to the right, it's the tail rotor. Very simple memory aid, but if you can remember that, E.T. immediately. When an examiner gives you a scenario, you're flying along, something bad happens, aircraft starts shaking and the nose goes this way, what just happened? E.T., tail rotor. Simple, easy, to help you then decide, what am I going to do next? I remember somebody explaining, I think it was the examiner, you need to know in an emergency what's going to happen. You know, you have to be able to think quickly, and any kind of a little tool you can use to quickly think through, how am I going to deal with whatever happened, knowing which way the nose went, engine, tail rotor is key. Another favorite that I'm amazed at how many people don't know this, I'll ask them, we're here at our airport, we're a little Class G airport, we've got a tower down here, and during the daytime, it's not like a sunny day, it's kind of iffy on the weather, and we look down and see the green and white light flashing during the daytime. What does that mean? It means the field's IFR. That's it. It means it's below 1,000 or below 3 miles visibility. What's your basic VFR? 3 miles and 1,000. So if during the day at a Class G, if that beacon's on, that could very well mean you're below VFR. And a lot of people screw that up too. As simple as that is, what's basic VFR? 3 miles and 1,000 feet. I like telling the story about Chris Hauser. Many of you know him from our videos, and he's up on the H.O.G.S wall, and he helps me instruct here at H.O.G.S. And he doesn't mind me telling the story because it's a great story. He did good on his private check ride, smoked it. Then we go back a certain amount of time later to do his commercial. That day we were late to the check ride, which is not good. Chris was having some trouble at home, wasn't getting along that well with the wife. And so his day was just kind of off anyway. And during the check ride for his commercial, he was struggling. Examiner's giving him some scenarios and talking about airspace. And he was getting a little bit confused. And he said, well, let's just back up to what's basic VFR. And Chris started going, oh, airplane, helicopter, day, night, and examiner's looking at me and I'm going, Chris, in my mind, I'm going, it's 3 miles and 1,000 feet, Chris. And he kept repeating these numbers in his head. And eventually the examiner's like, I'm gonna go get a cup of coffee and I'll be back. And he left the room and I'm like, Chris, all he's doing is asking you basic VFR. And he was so rattled from just starting out the day not so well. And it's just a good story because anybody can get frustrated in the moment. And that 3 miles and 1,000 feet is one that I see people trip up a lot in the heat of the moment. And here you go. They always ask this, private commercial CFI, check airmen on 135 check rides would ask this. 3 stages of a thunderstorm. I asked a CFI add-on applicant this recently and he was like, oh, that one's got all the downdrafts. And I'm like, come on, man, you're doing a CFI add-on. Cumulus, mature, dissipating. 3 stages of thunderstorm. Another one that they just love to ask. And I think I'll wrap it up right there just because I just wanted to do an in the moment, give you an idea of how I evaluate somebody. That's it. There's no big special process to it. It's like whether they're here in person on the couches or I'm jumping on the computer over there on Zoom. It's laid back, we're in t-shirts. When we go, hey, how you doing today? Well, what rating you working on? How many hours you got? Where are you flying? Okay, well, you're ready to get started? I just want to ask you some questions just to kind of evaluate your knowledge. And then we just get started. It's just laid back just like this. And again, I'll repeat myself. This is what I do when I'm trying to evaluate somebody's knowledge. And it doesn't take me, an hour and a half. It takes about 15 minutes. And if you're hitting all of that stuff and you're smooth, then I know we can continue on. I know that we're on a good pace. But if you're struggling there in those first couple pages, the things I just asked you, I don't care what rating it is. If you're struggling in those areas, you're not ready. Because as we continue through the book, I'm going to ask more of the same stuff. Talk about NOTAMs and talk about airmets and pilot reports and calling flight service and the different weather briefings. I can't tell you how people overlook the basics, and especially on these advanced ratings, commercial and CFI. Yes, you're already a rated pilot. That means you have to maintain the basic things you learned Private Pilot 101, and I'm telling you, I see this continually on commercial and CFI people who just kind of go, oh, I'm already rated. I'm a commercial guy. I'm a CFI. I'm a CFI add-on. I don't care. The examiner's still going to ask you that stuff. And my best example, I've told in videos before, 4 years ago I had to go renew my CFI or reinstate my CFI because I let it lapse. I didn't get my paperwork in time to renew. So I had to go see the examiner. And I thought, well, we've been doing check rides together for 20 years and we're buddies and this will be a quick, easy 20-minute oral. We'll go do a couple maneuvers and he'll go, you're good, and he'll sign me off. I'll tell you what, I got through it, but I should have sat down and went through my basic Private Pilot 101 stuff because my ego told me I could just walk in there and go do this renewal and I was going to be fine because I'm CFI. I've been doing this for all these years, blah, blah, blah. And it humbled me very quickly when he starts at the beginning, you know, what do you have to have on you? What do you have to have on the aircraft? You know, starts talking about flight reviews, and is it good? You're good in the helicopter, but are you good in the airplane, or you're good in the instrument, or you're good in the R-44, and all that basic stuff that we take for granted that we learned early on. They go back and review that stuff, and they go back and review that knowledge with you, because you need to maintain that knowledge throughout your career. It's not learn basic private pilot and then, okay, well now I'm a commercial guy, so I don't need to know that anymore. No, you still need that same basic private pilot 101 knowledge. That's the knowledge that you have to have. All right, let us know below if you like that. We are doing check rides here in the R-44. Reach out to us. Been pretty slow this summer. We have openings as of at this point. We have Helicopter Land Ground School. We help you online with private commercial instrument CFI. Those are all at helicopterground.com. Links below. And what should we throw below? You know what? You know what we should throw below? For you newbies, if you're new to this, or you don't even have to be a newbie. We did this last year, the Private Pilot 101 Helicopter Training Blueprint. This free PDF, we'll make sure that link is down below. You can go down below and also get a paperback or a Kindle version as well. We made this last winter, and we just went through and just tips and anything you can think of that helps a person get through getting that first rating, getting through the private pilot rating, getting through the check rides. We'll put a link down below for that. And let us know what you think about our little check ride prep there. Was it helpful? And we'll see you in the next video. Peace out.
When you feel the pressure to fly, but know the right decision is to stay on